Okay, this demonstration I'm going to talk about some of the repairing tools like the clone tool and the healing brush tools. So, we left off from our last one where we changed the girl's hat from red to green with replace color, so that's the file we're working with. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and blow up a section. I'm going to blow up this section right here near the girl's head. Okay, and this, you see here that there's like this kind of this yellowish hot spot to the right of her cap. That's what we're going to correct, and we're going to turn that into what would otherwise look like normal bricks. There's some different ways you could do that, but the way I'm going to show you right now is using the clone tool. Okay, so this right here is the clone tool, and the sort of midway roughly midway into the toolbar, and it's clone stamp tool. You can press on that, and if you click and hold it, you'll see that there are a couple of different tools. Right now we're going to focus on the clone stamp tool, not the pattern tool. Now, while that's selected, to use the clone tool, what you need to do is first take a sample of pixels that you want to basically make a copy of and then paste. And whenever you sample those pixels, you can use different types of brushes, sizes, and hardnesses. To do that, while the clone tool is selected up here in the options panel, you can select the brush size. I'm going to use around 20, roughly 21, something like that, because that's about the size of the section that I need to fix. And you want to change the hardness so that it's down to 0, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow, you can see roughly what these things look like, where you've got hard edges versus soft edges, and what it does is it creates soft edges on the edge of the sample so that it will blend a little bit better. Sometimes having a really soft edge works really well, and sometimes it just doesn't work very well at all. So you just have to experiment. But let's try these settings for now. Okay, so because I clicked off of it, it gave me that warning box, and the reason it did is because you can't use the clone tool without sampling pixels first, and so whenever I clicked, it assumed I was trying to use it without making a sample. So what you want to do is, let's take a sample first of all from here, and you'll notice also that we have aligned set up, and we have it selecting from the current layer, which is this layer over here that we're looking at. And the reason that we want to keep it aligned is because we want it to be with the same layer, but also we want these bricks to be in the correct line, so we want to make sure that we can keep it aligned with the same layer. And if I click the Option key on a Mac or Alt on PC, you see that I get these crosshairs. Alright, and I keep clicking it and releasing it just to show you what happens. What I'm doing whenever I press down the Option key is I'm getting ready to sample those pixels. So now I can click my mouse button and take a sample from right here, and what we're going to do is, you can see as I sort of am just hovering, I'm not clicking or anything, you can see the sample it's going to use, and I sampled it from right here. So I want to start on the left side as close to the hat as possible without getting inside of the hat, and I want to click and drag as straight as I can off to the right side, and then I can let up off my mouse, and then you see that it took that sample and it basically painted them in. Alright, and I had to go from left to right whenever I drew my sample out and pasted those pixels. You can't go from right to left because then it will have a different effect. It won't actually be able to draw in one sweeping gesture over it. It would only be able to create one sample. So you would have to take the sample on the right, and then you would have to click over here and then drag it as you're holding the mouse down, and then release it in the right place. And so that's how you use the clone tool. Okay, and you can practice in other areas too, and you don't have to click and drag it. Let's say for instance that we didn't like these two dots, and I could take my sample right here and I could literally just click once and not drag it, and then those two dots are gone. So you don't have to click and drag, you can also just click and then click somewhere else after you take your sample. Alright, now let's also go ahead and talk about the healing brush tool. Alright, so if you look on this toolbar off to the left, you will see something underneath the eyedropper, and right now I have this thing called the Content Aware Move tool selected, but the default is going to have something that looks like a band-aid, like this. It's a spot healing brush tool. And that's probably what you had on your screen. Now if you click and hold this, alright, and you'll see all of these different options underneath the spot healing brush tool, and you'll see that there's something called spot healing brush and there's something called healing brush. I'll explain the difference between them in a minute. But right now, let's just start with the spot healing brush tool. And actually I want to zoom out really quickly so that we can get a better sample of what we're looking at here. And I think what I want to do is focus on this section right up here, where there is this sort of large dot section. Okay, and let's go back up here now. We're going to choose the spot healing brush tool, and I can choose, right now this is maybe not quite as large of a brush as I want. I want to make mine a little bit bigger, so maybe in the ballpark of 30-40 pixels, somewhere in there. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and click out of that somewhere that's not on the picture. And what I want to do is, with the spot healing brush tool, is I don't have to sample anything. I can just literally click and drag, and I'm going to click from the outside of it, and I'm going to click and drag over it. And what it did to get rid of that is that it took samples from around where that blemish was, and it took a best guess at how to fill those pixels back in with its surrounding pixels. And it's smart because it's able to find the differences in color and so forth, so that it can mesh them together and look a little bit more uniform. And that's what this understands how to do, is how to sweep and drag, and it automatically makes assumptions about what's supposed to go there. So you can use it not for everything, but for a lot of things. And you'll also notice that what it did was it reproduced this white dot that's off to the right. Well, if we wanted to jump back down to the clone tool, we could. We could also take a much smaller sample brush for the spot healing tool, and we could actually click and drag it this direction, and now we got rid of it. Okay, now that's one thing that you can do to get rid of things with the spot healing brush tool, and you understand hopefully how it's different than the clone tool, where the clone tool is that you have to take samples and you're copying exact pixels and pasting them somewhere else, whereas the spot healing brush tool, first of all, you don't have to take a sample, and secondly, you can just click and drag and sweep over it, and what it does is it makes assumptions about what you want there based on the surrounding pixels, and it will create new data. Okay, and it is copying and pasting probably from other areas, but it's doing it in its own educated guess kind of way. Whereas with the clone tool, you're being explicit, telling Photoshop what you want to copy and paste. Now, how is that spot healing brush different than just the healing brush? Well, the healing brush tool is very similar, except that you actually are really supposed to take a sample, but I'm not going to show you that example. Another thing that you can use would be something called the patch tool. And we're going to actually go ahead and go back down here to, I guess I don't need to. I can actually just sort of scroll over to this section, because this is what we're going to use the patch tool to fix, is this sort of, I don't know, like body-shaped blemish here. And the way that the patch tool works is that you select the thing that you want to go away, and I can go ahead and draw, while the patch tool is selected, I want to kind of draw around this blemish. I'm not getting too terribly close to it, but I'm also trying to like sort of conform to it as well. And I can draw my circle around it, and then what I want to do is I want to take it and I want to drag it to where other pixels are, and I'm trying to keep it pretty well aligned. So I'm just dragging it straight over, and I can drop it, and what it does is it takes a sampling of those other pixels and it pastes them into place. And if you wanted to deselect these pixel selections, you can just, go to another tool or whatever, and you see that it still stays selected. Well, what you can do is press down Command D as in dog, or as in deselect, or Control D as in deselect, and you see that the selection goes away. And you can do that in a lot of different places. In fact, you could even take this whole set of little dots if you wanted to, And you could try to fix this little set by dragging it off to the side and replacing it. Okay, and then deselect it again, and then it looks a little bit better also. So there are lots of different tools that you can use for correcting blemishes. Those are two of the most useful ones, really, really handy. And if you click and hold here on top of the patch tool, you'll see also there's a thing called Content Aware Move Tool. We're going to talk about this later, just not in this demonstration, because really this is not quite the right demo for this particular tool. It's not the right image, I should say, for this tool. Red eye is also not the right image, but you can imagine what that's for. It's for getting out the red eye. So if you have pictures where you've got red eye, and then you can use this tool to get rid of it. You can experiment with that. It's pretty straightforward.